And I just want to welcome everyone to our 15-minute yoga break. You are welcome to join us for as much or as little of this practice as you like. And if you haven't already, I would recommend finding a chair. So you might find a chair, perhaps one with a little bit of a harder bottom. Sometimes that firmness can feel more supportive, but you can use whatever chair you have at your disposal. And maybe just as we come together, you might notice your breath. As I was talking, I noticed my breath was rushing and I was kind of holding my breath. So if you notice that maybe you were holding your breath, you might invite the breath back in. That's one option. Maybe as you're noticing your breath, you might notice the pacing of it. Like, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? You might notice movement in your body as you breathe. Maybe noticing movement in your belly or chest, or your throat or your nose. You might notice it somewhere else. You may not notice any sensation at all. You might have your eyes opened or closed as you breathe. You're welcome to have your eyes opened or closed throughout our practice, so you have a choice. And maybe turning your head to one side. So you might be turning your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or you could turn it as far as you can. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. And if your head is turned to the side, you're welcome to bring it back to center and maybe switching sides. So you might turn your head the other way. Maybe turning it part of the way, or you could turn it as far as you can. And you're welcome to notice your breath. And if your head is turned to the side, you might bring it back to center and perhaps tilting your head to one side. So you might be tilting your head to one side so that maybe your ear is moving in the direction of your shoulder. So you might have your head tilted to one side, and one option might be to have your eyes closed. You might have your eyes open. And you might experiment, maybe looking, if your head is tilted to one side, you might look out of the corner of your other eye, like maybe looking up and into the opposite side. Maybe noticing your breath. You might notice a yawn as you do that. And maybe bringing your head back to center. So you might have your head back to center and perhaps tilting your head the other way. So you might tilt your head to one side. So maybe your ear is moving in the direction of your shoulder. Maybe noticing your breath. And you could maybe do this with your eyes closed, or if your eyes are open, one option might be to look up and to the opposite side with your eyes, just with your eyes. So you might keep your head as is, maybe shifting your gaze up and to the side. This is known as the salamander technique. You might notice. Maybe bringing your head back to center and perhaps moving your shoulders. So one way to move your shoulders might be to roll them forward, or you could roll them back. You have a choice. You might make shoulder-sized circles, or you could make elbow-sized circles or full arm circles. You have a choice. And if you've been moving your shoulders and or your arms, you might bring them back to center. And maybe reaching one arm up overhead. So you might lift one arm up to the sky, and one option is to stay here. Another option might be to lean to the other side, so maybe placing your bottom arm on your chair or on your leg, and you might lean to the other side. Perhaps noticing your breath. You might notice sensation in your shoulder of your lifted arm. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center, and if your arm was lifted, you might lower it. And maybe switching sides, so you could lift your other arm up overhead, so you might have one arm lifted to the sky, and maybe staying here, or another option might be to lean to the side. So you might be leaning to the side. You're welcome to notice your breath. Maybe noticing sensation in your neck or shoulders, maybe the sides of your body, or maybe somewhere else. If you're leaning to the side, you're welcome to lift back up to center. And if your arm is lifted overhead, you might lower it. So you might have lowered down and maybe leaning back. So you might lean back slightly. So maybe your shoulders are off of the back of your chair. So you might be leaning back unsupported. Maybe noticing sensation in your abdominals. If you're leaning back, you might return to center, perhaps placing both of your hands on your legs. Maybe as you inhale, you might move your belly and chest forward, perhaps lifting your chest up. You might lift your chin, maybe looking up to the sky. And as you exhale, you might round your spine, maybe lowering your chin to your chest. And you're welcome to move between these two shapes on your own, maybe inhaling, moving your belly, chest forward, and your heart and head up. And maybe as you're exhaling, you might round your spine. And you're welcome to do a couple more at your own pace. Maybe noticing your breath. You might notice sensation in your back, or maybe somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And perhaps making your way back to seated, you're welcome to place both of your feet on the floor. You might place your feet hip distance apart, or you could place the inner edges of your feet together, so your knees might touch. And maybe bringing your arms by your sides, you might roll your shoulders up, back, and down. Maybe doing that again, maybe rolling your shoulders up, back, and down. You might do that one more time, maybe turning your palms forward and holding your shoulders where they are after you roll them up, back, and down. And perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky, you might notice your breath. Maybe noticing movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. And perhaps as you inhale, you might lift both your arms up overhead. And maybe as you exhale, you might fold forward. And one option, if you fold forward, might be to place your hands on the floor. You might have your feet together, or you might widen your feet apart. Another option might be to have your hands on your legs, or your forearms on your legs. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice your breath. Maybe noticing sensation in your back. Or maybe noticing something else. And folded forward, you might lift back up. Perhaps extending your right leg out in front of you. So you could extend your right leg out in front of you, maybe placing your heel on the floor. So you could have your right leg out somewhat straight in front of you, and maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. Another option might be to hinge at your hips, so maybe you're folding forward, perhaps placing your hands or forearms on your legs, or another option could be to place your hands on the floor. You have a choice. Perhaps noticing your breath. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up. And if your leg is extended out in front of you, you might bring it back, placing it on the floor. And maybe extending your other leg out in front of you. So you might place your other heel on the floor. You could flex your foot, maybe moving your leg towards straight. And you might stay here, perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward, perhaps placing your hands or forearms on your thighs, or you could place your hands on the ground. You have a choice. If you're folded forward, you might lift back up, and if your leg is extended, you might bring it back in. And maybe crossing your right leg over your left. So you might cross your right ankle over your left thigh. And perhaps opening your left knee to the side. Maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. You might notice your breath. Perhaps with your eyes opened or maybe closing your eyes. You might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. And if your leg is crossed over, you might release. And you're welcome to switch sides. So you could cross your left leg over your right. So maybe your left ankle is over your right thigh. Perhaps opening your left knee to the side. And maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. You're welcome to have your eyes opened or closed. Perhaps noticing the breath. You might notice some sensation in the outer hip of your top leg, which might be your left leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. And perhaps free these things. So if your leg is crossed over, you might bring both your feet down to the floor. And one option might be to turn to your right. So you might turn your torso to the right, maybe placing your left hand on the outer edge of your right leg. And you could place your right hand behind you on the chair, maybe turning to the right. If you've been turning to the right, you might return back to center and perhaps switching sides. So you might turn your torso to the left. So you might be facing towards the left, maybe placing your right hand on the outer edge of your left leg. And you're welcome to notice the breath. If you're turning to the side, you might make your way back to center and maybe reaching both arms up overhead as you inhale. You might bring your hands back to heart center, down by your sides as you exhale, and perhaps pausing here to rest. And we'll rest for about 15 seconds and I'll quiet my voice. You're welcome to rest longer if you like. Maybe noticing your breath. And perhaps noticing your breath. You might stay resting where you are longer. Or if you'd like, you might start to wiggle your fingers and toes, perhaps reorienting yourself to the space that you're in. It's been my pleasure to guide your practice today. Peace.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here, Lisa and Megan. And it's a pleasure to see you as always.